Hey guys, tonight we ride straight into the Wild West, but not the one you're thinking of. Not the polished movie version with heroic duels and noble cowboys riding into golden sunsets. No, we're going to the real one, the one that stank of rotting teeth, gun oil, and regret. A world where water could kill you, whiskey kept your guts from freezing, and your lifespan was tied to how fast you could reload. The Wild West wasn't a land of freedom, it was a land of desperation. And out here, if the land didn't kill you, the people might. You think you'd survive in the Old West? By the end of this, you might be praying for indoor plumbing, antibiotics, and Wi-Fi. This isn't just frontier life, it's frontier survival. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your eyes snap open to the sound of spitting. Someone's clearing their throat outside your wallif you can call a 3/4-inch plank of pine. A wallen the sun's already leaking in, pale and pitiless. You slept on straw again. The fleas are alive and well. You sit up, boots still on from the night before, the soles crusted with the mud and blood of last evening's stumble down Front Street. The stale stink of last night's tobacco breath lingers in your beer diff. You have honour, your hair, your clothes, your skin. You were drinking. You don't remember what. Could have been corn whiskey, turpentine, or snake oil. Someone's coughing hard outside your shack, hacking like they're tearing their lungs apart with a claw hammer. That's normal. Consumption doesn't knock out here. It just settles in and eats slow. The floor creaks under you as you stand. You have $4 in your pocket if you didn't drop it in the privy last night. Your gun's still at your hip. That's more important. Your boots are stiff with sweat and dirt, and your shirt smells like you haven't washed it in 2 weeks, which you haven't. You're in a cow town. Doesn't matter which one. Dodge City, Tombstone, Deadwood. They're all drawn from the same bottle of rotgut. Saloons, stables, a blacksmith, a bank if the town's lucky, and always a jail. That last one is usually half empty, unless the deputy got drunk last night and threw everyone in for the hell of it. You duck out into the sunlight, and it's already hoffle hot, even though it's early. Dust whips across the main street, like a living thing. The smell is part manure, part horse, part spilled beer, with a top note of sour sweat and wood smoke. Somewhere, bacon's frying, but it's probably salt pork tough as boot leather. Across the street, a woman in a gingham dress empties a bucket of something unpleasant off a porch. You hear it slap into the gutter with a wet thud. Hope you didn't step in that yesterday. You probably did. A pair of cowboys stumble past you, one with a black eye that looks fresh, still swelling. The other's laughing like a man who's been up 3 days. They smell like liver failure. One of them nods at you. Could be friendly, could be picking a fight. Hard to tell out here. Everything's written in codesquint, spit, swagger. You make your way towards the livery stable. That's where you're headed this morning. You've been promised a job driving cattle, or moving wagons, or maybe shoveling out stalls. Work's work. The stable smells like hay, manure, and animal heat. Inside, a kid barely out of boyhood is brushing a lopsided mule. He nods to you, says nothing. That's fine. You're not in a talking mood. The stable boss, a wiry man, with a sun-leathered face, tells you the job's gone. Someone else showed up earlier, had a horse. You don't. That's strike 1, maybe 2. You nod. You don't argue. You're not that stupid. You head toward the saloon instead. It's open. They never really close. Just wipe the blood off the floor and start over. The bar is scarred with burn marks and knife gouges. Behind it, a mirror that once belonged in a rich man's house is cracked, but still shows you just enough of your own face to remind you that you've aged badly. You buy a drink something brown that bites sand sit. Around you, men mutter, argue, groan. A card game is starting at one of the tables, but you know better. These men shoot each other over hands of 5-card draw, and nobody calls the law. They just drag the loser outside and let the flies clean up. A piano player, barely awake, taps out a few crooked notes with one hand while drinking with the other. He's missing a finger. You hear it before you feel it, the heavy clomp of boots, the sudden silence as someone new walks in. You glance. 2 men, one with a shotgun. Marshals? Bounty hunters? No. They're looking for someone. You? Nope. You exhale slowly. They cross the room, ask a question at the bar, and the bartender jerks his chin toward the back alley. You're safe. For now. You go outside, boots crunching dry dirt. A dog barks somewhere sharp and high, like it just saw something it didn't like. The sun's higher now. Your shirt sticks to your back. Your mouth is dry again. Always is. Water's not easy here. You can't trust the pump, it's been poisoned by waste. Rain barrels are safer, but they're low this time of year. You pass the undertaker. He's sitting out front in a rocking chair, sharpening a spade. He sees you, gives you a nod, like a man offering you a seat at the table, sooner or later. Back behind the jail, you piss in the dirt and watch it steam. That's when you hear the gunshot. Sharp, close. You freeze. You wait. You count to 5. Another shot, screaming. A horse spooks nearby. Someone yells. You don't run toward it. You don't run away. You just stay still, like most people here. You let the moment pass, then start walking again. Somebody's dead. Maybe someone you know. Maybe someone who had it coming. Either way, nothing you can do. It's just another day. Another sunrise in the Wild West. And you survived it. Barely. But it gets worse. The trail stretches out in front of you like a scar across the earth, uneven, unforgiving, and alive with dust. You've been riding for 6 hours already, and your thighs are screaming. The sun isn't even high yet. You're on a cattle drive. You signed up in town 3 days ago after the stables job fell through. The trail bosun, ex-Confederate sergeant, with a glass eye, and a mean streak barely looked at you before telling you to saddle up or shut up. You chose saddle. The herd is massive, longhorns mostly, with wild eyes and horns like dueling scythes. They move slow when they want to, and when they don't want to, God help you. Your job? Keep them moving, keep them grouped. Don't let any bolt off into the brush, or you'll be chasing them for hours, and if you lose one, it's docked from your pay. Lose 2, and you might get docked from your hide. The saddle creaks beneath you. It's not yours, was loaned to you by the Remuda man, who made it very clear you'd better bring it back or die trying. You've already got boils on your thighs from the leather rubbing wrong. You stink. Your socks haven't been dry since Monday. The smell of the herd is a living thing. Warm manure, sour sweat, piss-soaked dust. Your lips are cracked. Your canteen is nearly dry, and the next water stop is another 6 miles. If it's not dry, or poisoned, or guarded by snakes. The cook's wagon called the Chuck wagon, though nobody's sure who Chuck Israel's ahead in the distance. It's the most important part of the drive. The man who runs it is called the cookie, and he has absolute power over what goes in your belly. You don't piss off the cookie. Last night's dinner was beans, coffee, and something called son of a bitch stew, which you strongly suspect contained either prairie dog or badger. Either way, you haven't stopped belching since. You glance to your left. One of the older handsome man with a stitched-up jaw and no sense of humour is silently beside you, tapping his reins in rhythm. He hasn't spoken since dawn. He just hums. Some hymn. Or maybe something darker. A shout breaks the rhythm. Stampede. You don't think. You just react. The thunder hits before your mind catches up. Cattle surging like a brown wave, hooves tearing the earth, horns slicing the air, eyes wild. One of them slams into another, and they turn, creating a vortex of panic. They're not running from anything, they just spooked. That's all it takes. You dig your heels in, and gallop your horse whinnies in panic but obeys. You circle wide, trying to get ahead of the wave, trying to turn them, redirect them. You've heard about cowboys crushed under 1,000 hooves, their bodies pulped into the dirt like bad fruit. You yell. Everyone's yelling. The trail boss is barking orders, voice hoarse, trying to ride flank and cut across the led steers. You lose sight of one of the younger riders. His name was Jake, maybe. Or Jesse. He's gone now. The dust blinds you. Your hat flies off. Doesn't matter. You lean low in the saddle, heart slamming, and angle your horse in a wide arc, trying to turn the herd before they hit the arroyo. It works. Barely. The herd begins to slow. They scatter, collapse into a tired, trembling mess, sides heaving, tongues out. One of them is limping. 2 are dead. You find Jake. He's not moving. He's half buried under a carcass with a boot sticking out. You take your hat off. Someone mutters something that might be a prayer or a curse. The trail boss spits and keeps riding. No time to mourn. You ride on. By evening, the cook's wagon is set up. Supper is sourdough biscuits, coffee, and dried beef so hard it chips your tooth. You sit near the fire and nurse your canteen. You traded a plug of tobacco for more water earlier. It was worth it. The stars come out, sharp and brilliant, and someone's singing low and slow. It's not beautiful. It's not meant to be. It's just something to fill the silence. You lie down in your bedroll and try not to think of the dead boy or the 300 miles ahead. You think about rain, about snakes, about rustlers, about Comanche, maybe. Or worse, your own men turning on each other when the pay gets thin. You dream of being kicked in the teeth by a steer. You wake up to realize your face is resting in dried dung. You don't move. Not yet. The sky is turning purple. You'll ride again in 10 minutes. Every muscle hurts. You're not even halfway there. The saloon doors don't swing, they bang, groan, and stick halfway if the air's too damp. Yours catch on the frame as you shove through with your boot, the late sun sinking like a bullet behind the hills. The light inside is low and mean, filtered through the yellow-brown film of cigar smoke and old oil lanterns. It's payday. You made it through the drive. 300 miles, 2 stampedes, 1 dead steer, and 2 men buried somewhere between Fort Griffin and Abilene. You've got your share in your pocket-wadded, sweat-damp dollars that feel both sacred and doomed. You won't keep it long. No one ever does. The saloon smells like the inside of a drunk's mouth-sweet rot, sawdust, and cheap gin spilled into the cracks of the floorboards 100 times over. You step over a sleeping man with no boots and one eye swollen shut. Might have been a fight. Might have been his face just gave up. To your left, 2 gamblers are deep into a hand of faro. One has a knife buried halfway into the table between his knuckles, probably placed there earlier in the game to discourage cheating. The dealer doesn't blink. He's seen worse. A woman in red skirts hitched high, bodice one thread from surrender leans against the bar and eyes you like, your fresh meat walking into the butcher's shop. You nod. She doesn't smile. She's working. No room for real smiles here. You slide up to the bar. The wood's sticky. The mirror behind it is stained black at the corners, like the silver's rotting from within. So is the bartender. He pours without asking. Something brown, maybe whiskey, maybe not. You drink it. It burns in your gut, pulling the trail dust and fatigue down with it in one hot gulp. A piano plays. Off-key. Always off-key. The player is too drunk to fix it and too tired to care. He plays the same 4 songs on a loop. You don't know the names. You just call them Funeral Waltz, Dead Man's Jig, Someone's Crying Again, and The One with All the Screaming. You take your drink upstairs. The room costs 50 cents and smells like mildew and perfume battling it out to the death. You wash your face in a basin with water that might have been clean yesterday, then lie back on a mattress that sighs like it just wants to die. You drift. The dreams come fast. You're back on the trail, the herd's running. Again. The boy's body is twisted, mouth open, flies crawling in. The wind is a whisper, but it's speaking your name. You turn. There's no one there. Suddenly, you're in town, but it's wrong. The buildings are burning. There's blood on your hands. A noose hangs from the church steeple, swaying in windless air. You're walking, but the ground moves like mud. You sink. You wake up choking. It's night. Real night. Someone's screaming downstairs. A woman, then something crashes. You hear boots pounding on wood. A shot, then silence. You grab your gun. You wait. You don't move. It's not your business. Not unless it walks through your door. You lie back down, heart punching your ribs from the inside. The mattress is damp now with sweat. You stare at the ceiling. Sleep doesn't come easy. Not here. You drift again, somewhere between consciousness and surrender. The next time you open your eyes, it's because sunlight is leaking through a cracked shutter. You've got cotton mouth. Your joints ache. You have no idea what day it is. You check your pocket. Half your money's gone. You try to remember how. There's a bruise on your side. You touch it. Flinch. No memory. You sit up. Your boots are still on. That's something. Downstairs, the piano's playing again. Same 4 songs. Same rhythm. You stand. Stretch. Grimace. The trail is behind you. For now, time to find work again. Or trouble. Out here, they're usually the same thing. You wake with your mouth tasting like copper and dust. Your back cracks in 3 places as you sit up. You slept in your clothes again, on a straw-stuffed tick that's soaked up every body that's ever laid on it. The blanket smells like wet fur and chimney smoke. You don't know when it last saw water. You doubt it remembers. There's a bucket of water in the corner. It's lukewarm and yellow-tinged. You sniff it. Not good. You wet your fingers, rub your face, then spit. Good enough. You head outside into the morning heat. It hasn't rained in 8 days. The ground is dry enough to crack, like old bone under your boots. Your lips are already starting to split again. You need food. You need clean water. You need a place that doesn't leak or swarm with flies. You need things that this world doesn't give easily. You start with water. Most folks out here drink from barrels rain catchers rigged from old pickle tubs or whiskey casks. But no rain means the barrels are low, and what's left is a thick stew of insect wings, ash, and slime. You've seen people boil it, or filter it through cloth, or just drink it and pray their guts hold out. There's a hand pump down by the livery. They say the well beneath it runs deep and sweet, but last week someone dumped a dead dog nearby, and now half the town's afraid to use it. The preacher says it's God's way of testing the faithful. The doctor just shakes his head and boils everything. If you're lucky, you find a rancher passing through with a water barrel in his wagon. Maybe he'll sell you a cup for a nickel. Maybe he'll give it to you if you help unload. Maybe he'll shoot you for asking. It's a gamble. You carry a tin canteen. It's dented, beat to hell, and probably leaking. You fill it when you can. Guard it like a baby when you can't. Dehydration doesn't knock out. Hirate sneaks up, strangles your organs, and leaves you twitching in the dirt. Now food. Breakfast is either non-existent or the same thing you had for dinner beans. Pinto, mostly. Boiled until soft, then salted until your lips pucker. If you're flush with coin, you might get salt pork. But only if the rats haven't gotten to it first. You once bit into a piece that crunched. It wasn't seasoning. Cornmeal mush is common. So's stale bread. Butter's a luxury. Milk is rare unless someone just shot a cow. Eggs are treasured like gold, but they spoil fast in this heat. Most are half scrambled before they ever hit a pan. There's game, sure if you've got a gun, ammo, and luck, rabbits, squirrels, sometimes snake, prairie chickens, if they're in season, and haven't already been shot into extinction within 50 miles. You eat what doesn't kill you. That's the rule. And sometimes what doesn't kill you still makes you pray for death, spoiled meat, bad stew, moldy grain. You hear about whole families laid up with camp fever or bad belly because someone didn't cook their possum long enough or drank from a poisoned stream. Then there's hardtack. You've eaten it. Everyone out here has. It's not food, it's a survival contract. Flour, salt, and water baked into a brick hard enough to break teeth. You soak it in coffee, or soup, or blood, if that's all you've got. It lasts forever. So do the bugs inside it. Which brings us to shelter. Right now, you're living above the blacksmith's shop. He lets you rent the attic when you work for him, shoveling coal, hauling scrap, pumping the bellows. The room's no bigger than a jail cell. Sloped roof, one window, no insulation. It bakes you in the day and freezes you at night, but it's yours. Other folks live in dugouts, literally holes in the ground, reinforced with timber, covered in sod. Dirt walls, dirt floors, and walls that sweat when it rains. If it rains. Some families share their shelter with livestock. Keeps the animals safe, keeps the humans warm, also keeps the fleas jumping and the smell unforgettable. If you're rich and rich, here just means you own a cow and a roof that doesn't leak. You might live in a one-room cabin, wood-framed, maybe a stove, maybe shutters. If you're real lucky, you've got a privy. If not, you piss out back and pray no snakes found the hole first. The saloon has rooms upstairs, but they're not homes. They're places to sleep it off, sweat it out, or lose your last silver dollar to someone with a smile too wide and a name that probably isn't real. There's no real privacy, no locks that can't be kicked open, no space that isn't shared with lice, spiders, or ghosts. And yet, you survive. You learn to chew coffee beans when there's no time to boil. You stash jerky in your boots. You split a loaf of cornmeal bread 5 ways and call it supper. You patch your boots with scrap hide and stuff newspaper into your hat to block the sun. You steal moments of shade like a bandit and protect your canteen like it's sacred. Because it is. Water, food, shelter, not wants, needs. Out here, they're more than survival. They're proof you're still alive. You think your tooth is dying. It started as a throb, just behind your eye, then a sharp jab when you bit down on a biscuit 2 days ago. Now the left side of your jaw is pulsing like a drumline, hot and swollen. You haven't slept right in 2 nights. Every breath of cold air makes you flinch. There's no dentist here. Not really. There's a man who owns a pair of pliers and drinks before doing his work. His sign says, "Tooth pulled 25. There's no anesthetic, just whiskey. You pay up front in case you faint or die halfway through. He doesn't wash the tools, he wipes them on his sleeve. Your tooth still hurts, but not as much as your pride would if he cracked your molar and left the root in. So you wait. You chew on the other side. You rinse with whiskey, hold warm cloths to your cheek, and hope it bursts or stops hurting on its own. That's medicine out here. Hope. If you catch a fever, you sweat it out. You lie on your back and hallucinate while someone spoons water past your lips and prays the shivers stop before your organs do. There's no penicillin, no antibiotics, no germ theory at least not one most people believe. Some doctors boil their tools now, some don't. You've seen a woman give birth on the dirt floor of a dugout. Midwife squatting beside her with a bone needle and thread. The mother was 15. The baby came fast and silent. No one spoke for a long time afterward. The father went outside and didn't come back. You've heard about prairie madness. The silence gets to people, the wind, the loneliness. You've seen men walk into town with dead eyes and blood on their shirts, saying nothing, just staring at the horizon like it owes them something. Sometimes they shoot themselves. Sometimes someone else does it for them. There's a doctor in town. Sort of. A former army surgeon who drinks before noon and smells like iodine and sour milk. He charges more than you make in a week, but if you're shot, he's your only chance. He keeps his tools in a cracked leather bag, bone saw, scalpel, forceps. He doesn't have gloves. He smokes while he works. Gunshot wounds are common. Knives too. You've seen a man stitched up with horsehair and survive. You've seen another bleed out from a graze in the thigh. Just bad luck. Hit an artery. No one could stop it. You carry bandages in your saddlebag. Torn shirt, whiskey, needle and thread. You've sewn your own arm once. Shaky work. Bled like a pig, but it held. Cholera is a ghost that rides rivers and shanty towns. You know the signs: watery stool, cramps, vomiting, eyes sunken like coins pressed into clay. If it hits fast. You're dead in a day or two usually. People bury loved ones with hands still twitching. Then there's dysentery. The shits, they call it. Like your guts are melting. Dirty water is the cause, and everything out here is dirty. You can't tell the difference between a stomach bug and a death sentence until it's too late. If you break a bone, it stays broken. Maybe a splint. Maybe someone ties it with strips of deer hide and sets it with a piece of old door frame. If it heals crooked, you live crooked. You've seen men walk with a limp, drag a leg, or favour an arm that never healed right. No one stares. Everyone has something broken. Everyone's body is a ledger of injuries. They survived, and sins they didn't. Snakebite? Pray. There's a cure involving whiskey, sucking the venom and cutting the skin. Doesn't work. Most bites swell, rot and kill. If they don't kill, they cripple. Sunstroke is another killer, especially on the trail. You ride too long, forget to cover your head, or drink too little, and suddenly the world tilts. Your mouth goes dry, your skin goes hot, then cold. You vomit. collapse. If no one notices, they'll find your body curled around your saddlebag, your lips black with dust. Women suffer worse. Childbirth kills them young. Infection after. Blood loss. Babies die too. Half of all children won't see 5. The rest are born into a world that wants them gone. There's no such thing as comfort care. You grit your teeth and bear it. If you're lucky, someone boils water and holds your hand. If you're really lucky, you pass out. There are folk cures, superstitions, a pinch of ash under the tongue, a silver coin in the shoe, piss on a wound to cleanse it, burn a lizard alive to treat warts, hold a dog's paw to stop a nosebleed. You've tried some, not proud of it, but when the pain gets loud enough, you'll try anything. And yet people keep living. That's the strangest thing. With all this blood, disease and ruin, people still rise each morning. Still eat, drink, walk. Still fall in love. Still tell stories. You don't know how. Maybe stubbornness. Maybe spite. Or maybe life, out here, is just too hard to give up on. Not because it's good, but because it's yours. The Wild West was not chaos. It only looked that way. Beneath the gunfights, whiskey breath, and outlaw songs, there were rules unspoken, uneven, and sometimes lethal if misunderstood. Everyone had a place. And if you didn't, you learned faster died slow. Take the law, for starters. There were sheriffs, deputies, marshals, but most towns couldn't afford more than a single badge, and that badge was usually pinned to the chest of the meanest drunk who could shoot straight and didn't ask too many questions. Justice was swift, sloppy, and deeply personal. There were trials, technically, but more often there were fists, nooses, and the backs of horses. If someone rustled cattle or got caught with another man's wife, the result might be a shallow grave behind the livery stable. If they were lucky, if they weren't, the town might gather to watch justice get done on a branch thick enough to bear the weight of a man who begged until the last moment. Revenge was its own court system. If your brother was shot, you didn't wait for the sheriff. You tracked the killer, found him drunk or sleeping or praying, and gave him your answer in lead. That was the way. Blood for blood. Hatred aged like whiskey, passed down through families. Women had rules too, harder ones. Out here, a woman's worth was often tied to 3 things: who she married, who she served, or how well she could charge for her body. A saloon girl could make a living, sure, but she paid for every dollar with her health and safety. Disease was common, violence even more so. A respectable woman had to walk a knife's edge. Speak too loud, and she was uppity. Dress too fine, and she was suspicious. Work too hard, and she was a threat. She was expected to endure pain, bear children, feed men, and keep quiet. Widowhood came often and young. Survival meant adapting, becoming sharper, colder, harder. Many did. And some ran their towns better than the men ever could. Children worked, always. There were no school bells out here, no lunch boxes. A child old enough to stand was old enough to haul water, gather eggs, clean rifles, dig graves. 10-year-olds rode fences. 12-year-olds shot wolves. 15-year-olds died in saloon brawls, trying to prove something no one would remember. Racial hierarchy ruled everything. White settlers sat atop the food, chain barely. Black men who had escaped slavery or been freed found themselves as cowhands, porters, or servants. They were often more skilled with horses than their white counterparts. Some became trail bosses, legends in their own right, but respect came slowly, if at all, and always with a loaded cost. Chinese immigrants built the railroads bone by bone, paid less, worked harder, and lived in camps on the outskirts of town where lynch mobs could visit by moonlight. Their medicine was considered witchcraft, their food filth, their lives disposable. Mexican vaqueros were the blueprint for the cowboy butt. They were erased, disrespected, taxed out of ownership, and pushed south or into the margins. The language they created, the lasso, the rodeo, the ranch was stolen, whitewashed, rebranded. And then there were the indigenous peoples. The tribes of the plains, the Comanche, Cheyenne, Lakota, Apache had lived on this land long before boots and bullets arrived. But now they were seen as threats, obstacles, monsters, the US. Government made treaties, broke them, made new ones, broke those too. Reservations were drawn, erased, redrawn. Children were stolen, women slaughtered, elders starved. Still, they resisted, fought, survived. The social ladder out here didn't reach far. A rich rancher or saloon owner might sit at the top, but he was always one fire or robbery away from ruin. Below him were the drifters, the workers, the gamblers, the whores, the stable boys, the cooks, the broken veterans, the wanted men trying to pass as harmless. And beneath them were the invisible, the laborers, the enslaved, the outcast, the broken. But even at the top, no one was safe. You could be powerful and still lose everything in one card game. You could be respected and still take a bullet in the back from a stranger with nothing to lose. Fame was fragile. Honor was negotiable. Legacy was usually a lie, carved into a pine box someone else paid for. In this world, the currency of survival was reputation. You lived or died by how others perceived you. Were you fast, tough, connected, unafraid? Those rumors protected you more than any gun, but they also painted targets on your back. And yet, despite the violence and injustice, people chose to live here. Because this place, cruel as it was, offered something they couldn't get elsewhere: a second chance. You could reinvent yourself, leave a name behind, be reborn with nothing but a saddle, a story, and a dead stare. No questions asked. But you'd pay for it, every day, in sweat, in blood, in silence. And maybe, if you lasted long enough, you'd get to choose the name they carve on your gravestone. Morality in the Wild West wasn't absent, it was adapted. There were rules, dozens of them. They just didn't come from books. Not really. They came from looks across a poker table, from what a man did when another reached for his gun, from how a woman held her ground when a drunk came close. They came from instinct, gut feeling, and the 1,000 hard-earned stories that travelled faster than trains. Still, many clung to God, not the soft, comforting God of stained glass and Sunday school, but a furious, vengeful one. The kind that smites cities, drowns sinners, and tests you until your bones snap. Churches were built quickly, usually from the same timber as the saloon next door. Sometimes they were the saloon, rented out on Sundays when the preacher came through. Firebrand ministers would ride into town with wild eyes and cracked Bibles, shouting about brimstone and Babylon, warning that dancing, gambling, and loose women were the gateway to hell. The same men might be found drunk and weeping behind the general store 2 days later. Religion was emotional, raw, and physical. Tent revivals would light up the prairie with wailing, sweating believers convulsing in the dirt, begging for forgiveness between lightning flashes. Faith healed some, it destroyed others. For those outside the Christian fold, indigenous peoples, Chinese immigrants, African spiritualist belief ran in older, deeper veins. A Cheyenne warrior might carry a sacred bundle, filled with feathers, bones, and earth, blessed by elders. A Chinese rail worker might leave incense and rice at a small wooden shrine to the kitchen god, even while white foremen laughed behind their hands. Black cowhands might whisper old conjure prayers before crossing dangerous water or burying the dead. Magic wasn't entertainment out here, it was protection. Everyone had their own version. A silver dollar sewn into a jacket to stop a bullet, a horseshoe hung above a door to ward off sickness, a carved bone in a boot, a dried lizard strung on twine to keep the devil out of your dreams. Superstition was law when the law failed, and it failed often. Ghost stories thrived on the plains. You could walk into any saloon between Kansas and Arizona and hear a tale about a murdered gambler whose bloody footprints still appear on the stairs, or the widow who sings outside your tent the night before someone dies. Cattlemen swore the wind carried voices. Prospectors insisted they saw shadow men in abandoned mines, always just out of reach. Even hardened killers believed in curses. One outlaw refused to rob any bank built on land that once held a cemetery. Another carved notches into his pistol grip for each man he killed, swearing that when the handle split, his time would be up. It did, and it was. Folk heroes grew in the cracks between truth and need. People told stories about Wild Bill Hickok shooting a man through the heart from 30 feet in a dust storm, about Calamity Jane wrestling wolves with her bare hands, about black cowboys like Nat Love who could shoot a coin out of the air while riding bareback and drunk. Were they true? Doesn't matter. People needed them to be. They needed someone to admire, someone tougher than life, wilder than death, someone who bent the world and didn't break. These stories were armor. They made the dust, the blood, the crooked judges, and dead children just a little more bearable. And then there were the personal codes. Some men didn't shoot unless shot at. Others killed for a sideways glance. Some wouldn't lie. Some lied for sport. Some protected women. Others preyed on them. It wasn't about universal right or wrong. It was about individual lines in the sand. Cross a man's line, and he'd kill you. Respect it, and you might just earn a friend for life, or at least someone who wouldn't rob you blind while you slept. The West didn't have a shared morality. It had overlapping pockets of desperate ethics, floating just long enough to keep the worst from swallowing the rest. And for many, morality was measured in how you died. Were you brave? Did you face it standing? Did you look the man in the eye who pulled the trigger? A good death was everything. Sometimes it was all a person had left. They might have lived filthy, violent, and forgotten, but if they died clean, fast, with iron in hand and courage in their spine, the world might remember them. And if not, well, the crows would. The Wild West ran on sweat, steel, and speculation. It was built quickly and violently, like a fever dream turned real at gunpoint. At its heart, it was a boom economy explosive, unsustainable, and devastating in its aftermath. Towns rose overnight because of a single rumor: gold in the hills, silver in the river, oil beneath the scrub. And when the wells ran dry, or the mines collapsed, those same towns emptied faster than a whiskey bottle in a saloon fight. The engines of Western expansion weren't cowboys or gunslingers. They were railroads, cattle drives, and mining camps. The railroad was the spine. The Transcontinental Railroad, completed in 1869, was an industrial juggernaut that carved through indigenous land like a knife through hide. It linked east to west, steel to gold, ambition to geography. Towns lived or died by the track. If the rail came through your land, you thrived. If it passed you by, you withered. Building it was hell. Thousands of Chinese immigrants laid the rails through the Sierra Nevada drilling, blasting, hauling stone by hand. They worked through snow, rock slides, dynamite blasts, and racial abuse so savage that white foremen sometimes called them coolie corpses before they were even dead. Their names weren't recorded. Their deaths were. On the Great Plains, Irish immigrants did the same, dodging buffalo herds, hostile militia, and collapsing trenches. The pay was low, the hours were endless, the deaths were silent, and still the trains came. The cattle industry was the West's blood supply. After the Civil War, eastern cities needed beef. The West had it. Texas longhorns by the thousands grazed freely across the open range. Cowboys, often young, poor, and mixed race, drove herds hundreds of miles north to railheads in Kansas and Nebraska, where they were loaded onto trains and shipped east for slaughter. Each drive was a logistical nightmare. Stampedes, droughts, river crossings, rustlers, and border disputes made every mile a gamble. The pay was terrible, the work was punishing, and yet cattle barons made fortunes. Land, of course, was the key to all of it. The Homestead Act of 1862 gave away 160 acres to anyone willing to improve it. For many white families, it was a lifeline. For indigenous nations, it was theft legalized. U.S. Land surveyors carved up territory with total disregard for existing communities or treaties. Settlers arrived with deeds. Native families were forced onto smaller and smaller reservations, killed resisting. Farming was promised as freedom, but the land itself was indifferent. Crops failed. Locusts came. Rivers flooded or dried. A single bad winter could wipe out a decade's worth of work. Banks foreclosed. Families broke. Some sold their land back to wealthy buyers, railroad companies, cattle syndicates, or mining magnates who consolidated it into massive holdings. What started as a dream became a business empire, and that empire was rarely owned by the people who worked it. Then there was mining, perhaps the most iconic and most destructive economic engine of the frontier. Gold in California, silver in Nevada, copper in Arizona. Every discovery launched a frenzy. Prospectors flooded in, followed by pickpockets, claim jumpers, and whores. Boom towns swelled to 10,000 people, in months most living in tents or shacks, drinking creek water laced with mercury runoff from sluicing operations. The lucky few struck it rich. Most dug themselves into an early grave. Big money came when corporations arrived. They bought up small claims, mechanized the digging, and paid men to tunnel until the mountain gave out or collapsed. Safety regulations didn't exist. Miners died of cave-ins, gas leaks, black lung, wages were low, replacement was easy. Banks sprang up in the chaos. Some were legitimate, most were not. Credit was given at insane rates. Foreclosures were swift. Gold was weighed and shaved. Silver was often counterfeit. Scams were everywhere. The frontier attracted the hopeful and the predators who fed on them. Yet amid all this, infrastructure took shape. Wells were dug, telegraph poles rose. Bridges were thrown across canyons using nothing but ropes, whiskey, and willpower. Roads, though crude, linked far-flung settlements. Stagecoaches ran regular route until they were robbed. Laws were written then ignored. Town councils formed then collapsed in shootouts. The economy outpaced the law at every turn. Still, people built. They laid bricks, forged iron, baked bread, brewed beer, tanned hides, opened schools, ran newspapers, delivered mail, bought dresses, sold coffins, not because they believed in the system, but because there was no alternative. If you didn't participate, you were shut out, or worse. This economy was unforgiving. It lifted some, crushed others. It rewarded risk. Yes, but only when backed by resources, violence, or both. And beneath all of it, a brutal truth persisted. The West wasn't won. It was extracted. Every dollar that changed hands came soaked in sweat, soot, and blood. And the deeper you dig, the more bones you find. By the end of the 19th century, the Wild West was already disappearing even as the world was just starting to write it down. Towns that once pulsed with drunken gunfire and cattle herds slowed to a crawl. The iron web of railroads grew thicker, tighter, until isolation, the great defining trait of the frontier, was no longer a given. Steam trains rolled across territory, once too wild to imagine crossing. Telegraph wires sang with news that arrived faster than gossip. Suddenly, the West was not so wild. The open range closed. Barbed wire, invented in 1874, changed everything. Cheap, easy to install, and brutally effective, it ended the era of free-grazing cattle. Now, every rancher fenced their land and shot anyone who cut it. Fence wars broke out. People died over wire, over property. The cowboy once, the symbol of wild freedom, became an employee. Still tough, still necessary, but now bound by law, wage, and hierarchy. Gold ran out. Mines went dry. Boomtowns became ghost towns, their wooden buildings leaning like old men, windows broken, doors creaking in the wind. Some were stripped bare, salvaged by scavengers who sold their nails and floorboards to the next town over. Others simply dissolved into memory, names surviving only on brittle maps. As the government consolidated control, military outposts became state offices. Soldiers gave way to surveyors. Treaties gave way to taxes. The last major battles with indigenous nations' wounded knee in 1890 were massacres more than wars, mop-up operations against starving resistance. The myth of the West had already taken hold. Buffalo Bill Cody turned it into a live show, the Wild West touring, the U, and Europe with reenactments of Indian fights, cowboy trick shots, and romanticized violence that bore little resemblance to the real thing. Audiences ate it up. Royalty applauded it. History curdled into spectacle. Hollywood would later perfect the distortion. Cowboys became white hat-wearing heroes, their moral codes clear and simple. The dirt and blood and racial complexity was scrubbed out. Women were damsels or saloon girls, never owners, never fighters, never the hard-spined survivors they'd been. Indigenous people were turned into faceless enemies, reduced to war cries and arrows. The real people vanished under the costume. But the truth still lingers. The Wild West was not an era of noble savagery. It was a pressure cooker. A place where systems broke down and people had to improvise, sometimes brilliantly, often violently. It was a land of first chances and last resorts. Freed black men moved west to escape Reconstruction-era brutality in the South, joining cattle drives and building entire black communities like Nicodemus, Kansas. Chinese immigrants, after building the railroads, opened restaurants and laundries, creating pockets of culture that still survive today. Women ran hotels, published newspapers, shot their way out of marriages. They were teachers, madams, vigilantes, doctors. The West was not white. It was not male. It was not clean. But it was transformative. The brutality of its birth shaped the nation. Its myths infected the American mind. The individual triumphing over adversity, the gun solving what courts could not, the land as both opportunity and enemy. These fantasies continue to echo through politics, culture, identity. But beneath the myth, the bones remain. Old rail tracks, half buried in prairie grass, bullet holes in barroom walls, cemeteries with markers, so weather-worn the names are gone, just indentations where letters used to be. You can still visit the remnants, still touch the wood, feel the wind, and imagine what it meant to stand in a town where the sheriff might be drunk, your neighbour might be a killer, and your best hope for justice was how fast you could draw. Some call it freedom, others call it madness. But one thing is certain, the Wild West ended, and as it did, the world got quieter but never simpler. In the spring of 1453, the air above Constantinople hung thick with prophecy. The city once, the beating heart of the Roman Empire's eastern half, was surrounded. The Ottoman army, under the 21-year-old Sultan Mehmed II, had set up camp outside its mighty walls. Cannons, tents, siege towers. A war machine humming with certainty. Inside, behind the ancient triple walls of Theodosius, a desperate city watched its end slowly arrive. They prayed. They polished icons until the paint wore thin. They whispered to each other in Greek, Latin, and broken fragments of older tongues. But no army came to help. No fleets appeared on the horizon. The Byzantine Empire, once a colossus of wealth, science, and faith, now consisted of a few crumbling districts, a hollow treasury, and a ruler clinging to dignity by the tips of his fingers. Constantine XI, Palaiologos, the final emperor, did not flee. He didn't weep. He put on armor. His name was a cruel echo Constantine, like the first Christian emperor. He ruled a dying world that still lit candles under the dome of Hagia Sophia, hoping Christ might intervene one last time. But this time, God was silent. Outside the walls, Mehmed's cannons monsters cast in bronze, 27 feet long, began to fire. The sound was like thunder being torn in half. Stone cracked, shook, splintered. People inside the city flinched with every strike as mortar gave way and dust rained down from centuries-old ceilings. The city's walls had once repelled Persians, Arabs, Crusaders. Now they groaned like something ancient waking up to die. The siege dragged on for weeks. Inside the city, starvation, dried lentils, mouldy grain, dead horses, corpses, buried at night to avoid panic. A city that had once hosted emperors, libraries, scholars now burning furniture for warmth and boiling leather for soup. Still, they held. The defenders were a patchwork force. A few thousand Greeks, Genoese mercenaries, led by a hot-headed Italian named Giovanni Giustiniani, who fought like he had something to prove. Monks with swords, shoemakers with pikes, women carrying stones to the ramparts, shrieking prayers at the heavens. And the walls still held until they didn't. On May 29th, at the break of dawn, after 53 days of siege, the Ottomans launched their final assault. Waves of soldiers crashed against the broken wall sections. Arrows, bullets, spears. The defenders, half-starved and bleeding, fought like demons. Giustiniani was struck by a cannon splinter and evacuated. His men faltered. The Ottomans surged forward. Some say Constantine tore the imperial insignia from his armor and threw himself into the melee, sword raised, vanishing into the chaos. Others claim his body was never found. What is certain is that he died as an emperor, defending the last stone of his empire. Then the gates fell. Ottoman troops poured in, And the city once, the greatest fortress in Christendom, was consumed. What followed was 3 days of sanctioned plunder. Soldiers stormed through palaces, workshops, and convents. Churches were looted, icons smashed, altars desecrated. Survivors were enslaved, rich and poor alike. Some chose suicide over captivity. Others hid in crypts, whispering psalms as boots thundered above. Hagia Sophiaense, the most glorious cathedral in the world, became a fortress. Its great dome echoed with screams and cannon fire. Worshippers were slaughtered on its marble floors. Blood mixed with incense smoke. And then, silence. Mehmed entered the city on horseback, dust-covered and solemn. He dismounted at Hagia Sophia, ordered the cross removed, and commanded an imam to recite the Adhanthi Islamic call to prayer beneath the dome. The world changed in that moment. The Byzantine Empire, which had lasted over 1,000 years, was gone. The Eastern Roman line ended not with a treaty, not with exile, but with fire and steel. And yet, something else began. Mehmed spared what remained of the city's scholars and artisans. He repopulated Constantinople with Muslims, Christians, and Jews. He turned it into Istanbul, the new capital of a new empire Rome that would endure for nearly 5 more centuries. Still, the fall haunted the Christian world. In Europe, the Vatican trembled. Kings whispered that the Antichrist had risen in the East. Refugees carried books, ideas, languages out of the ashy sand, planted the seeds of the Renaissance. But for those who had walked the streets before the siege, who remembered the mosaics in the palaces, the chants in the churches, the flickering gold of candlelit domizit was a scar that never healed. A city built on divine destiny had fallen, not because it was faithless, but because faith alone could not stop progress, or gunpowder, or history. The monk moved slowly across the polished marble of Hagia Sophia. His sandaled feet made no sound. Only the wind, whistling faintly through the upper windows, disturbed the silence, carrying with it the faint, hollow thunder of distant cannons. He didn't flinch anymore. The city had been trembling for weeks. He knew each blast by rhythm now. The short roar of the lighter culverins, the groaning detonation of the great bombarder one they said had been cast with Christian bells melted down by the enemy. He paused beneath the dome. The candlelight shimmered on the ancient gold mosaics above, the images cracked and faded, but still watching. Saints and seraphim, Christ Pantocrator, the Theotokos. Their faces were smudged now, the tiles dulled by age and war, but they still held the weight of centuries. He had been a boy when he first walked these halls, carrying water for the elder priests. Now he was 53, his back bent, his eyes sharp from years of scripture, and he would be one of the last. They'd already cleared out the relics are tried. The holy spear, a splinter of the true cross, the Virgin's sash. Some were buried beneath the altar, hidden in vaults behind stone panels no Ottoman would find unless God led them straight to it. Others had been smuggled out by boat weeks ago, perhaps to Rome, perhaps to the bottom of the sea. He walked toward the iconostasis, the great screen that divided nave from sanctuary. Once it had glittered with silver and gold. Now dust coated it like ash. Someone had tried to scrub away the filth yesterday, using a child's cloak, he'd noticed. The child hadn't returned since. Behind him, the heavy oak doors stood open. Civilians were filing in, quietly. Dozens, maybe more. Mothers clutching infants, elderly men muttering prayers, children dragging wooden toys behind them like ghosts. Word had spread across the city by candlelight. When the walls fall, come to the cathedral. They believed it would protect them. They believed this place, sanctified by centuries, would be off limits. That Mehmed would honor it, preserve it, fear it. But the monk knew better. He'd read the prophecies, yes. Knew the stories. The one about the marble emperor who would return in the hour of greatest need. The one about the angels descending to seal the doors of the Hagia Sophia forever. But he had also read history. Rome had burned. Jerusalem had fallen. Antioch, Alexandria, now Constantinople. He did not believe in miracles anymore. He believed in reverence. And reverence meant preparing. He lit the last incense. The smoke curled upward like a snake, slow and deliberate. It smelled of frankincense and old tears. He chanted softly at first, then louder. Greek, Latin, phrases passed down through scorched manuscripts and trembling hands. Other priests joined him, their robes tattered, stained. But they sang with full voices, echoing off the great dome, until the very air trembled. Kyrie eleison. He walked down the nave, past the faithful. Some were weeping, some clutching crosses so tightly their knuckles were white. One woman whispered the name of every emperor she could remember, as if reciting them would summon one back. He reached the doors. They were immense banded oak, older than most of the men who guarded the city's walls. They creaked when opened. They wept when closed. He placed his hands upon them, paused, listened. He could hear them now. The Ottomans. Their voices in the distance chanting Allahu Akbar, banging shields, the rhythmic drumbeat of soldiers lining up for the final push. He took one last breath. It tasted like candle wax and blood. And he pulled the doors shut. The sound echoed like a tomb ceiling. Iron bolts slid into place. Wood groaned. Darkness pooled at the edges of the cathedral. Inside, the people pressed closer. A woman began to scream. A child asked if the angels would protect them. The monk didn't answer. He walked back to the altar. Slowly, deliberately, he touched the chalice, the gospel book, the edge of the worn marble where so many knees had bent. And then he knelt, not in fear, but in surrender, to history, to the unchanging, blood-stained churn of empires. As the doors behind him shattered open, and the world changed forever, when Mehmed II rode into Constantinople, he did not smile. The streets stank of blood and ash. Smoke curled from temples and rooftops. Dogs barked at bodies they weren't yet brave enough to chew. Lutesome official. Some note rushed down alleys with goblets, icons, textiles. Women wept. Men begged. The old prayed. And the city itself, it groaned under the weight of its own past. Mehmed dismounted near the great square of the Augusteion. There, in front of the shattered Senate building and the column of Constantine, he looked up at the dome of Hagia Sophia cracked, blackened, but still standing. He was 21. They called him Fatih, now the Conqueror. His generals asked what to burn next, what to destroy, which priests to execute, which temples to flatten. He told them, no more fire. The city was not to be destroyed. It was to be reborn. Because Mehmed did not just want victory, he wanted legitimacy. He saw himself not just as a sultan but as the heir of Rome. So, he went to Hagia Sophia, and he made it his. The carpets were rolled in, the crosses taken down. The mosaic of Christ above the apse was plastered over carefully, not smashed. Arabic inscriptions were painted across the interior. A mihrab pointed the faithful toward Mecca. Minarets would come later, but already the transformation had begun. The first Friday prayer echoed under that vast dome just days after the conquest. A new chapter had started. Mehmed issued a Firmana royal decree. Churches could remain open if they submitted. The city's Greek patriarchate was reinstated under Ottoman oversight. Muslims, Christians, and Jews would live here side by side, but the hierarchy was now Islamic. Tolerance, yes. Equality, no. Then came the resettlement. The city had been dying for decades before the siege-empty houses, abandoned workshops, deserted ports. It was, in many places, a skeleton with a golden skull. Mehmed ordered it filled. He brought in Muslims from Anatolia, Greeks from Thrace, Armenians, Jews, Syrians, craftsmen, shipbuilders, mosaic workers, anyone who could patch a roof or mix lime mortar. They were offered tax breaks, gifts, ransom were compelled, forcibly resettled. It worked. Within months, new neighborhoods sprang up like weeds through cracks. The Ottomans didn't erase the city, they grafted themselves onto it. The hippodrome became a parade ground. Palaces were converted or rebuilt. The land walls were repaired, reinforced with Ottoman-style towers. Markets bloomed around old cisterns. Slaves were sold in plazas where senators once walked. Mosques rose where emperors once knelt. The city's name didn't officially become Istanbul right away. That came later, through usage more than law. It derived from the Greek phrase eis tin polin, into the city, a fitting evolution. But no matter the name, the purpose had changed. Constantinople had been the capital of an empire that saw itself as Christian, imperial, universal. Istanbul would become the capital of an empire that saw itself as Islamic, pragmatic, and eternal. Mehmed didn't just rebuild the city, he refocused the world. He invited scholars from Persia, calligraphers from Baghdad, mathematicians from Cairo. He read philosophy in 3 languages. He wore Byzantine robes over Islamic armor. He funded madrasas, libraries, and observatories. He demanded maps of Europe and studied the stars. And yet, he ruled with iron. Dissent was crushed. Rebels flayed. Conquered peoples taxed into submission. The Janissariesh's elite infantry patrolled the streets in silence. The bureaucracy expanded, papered in Arabic script, recording every coin, every brick, every birth. Istanbul became the jewel of an empire that would span 3 continents. But it never forgot what it had taken to get there. The trauma of the fall lingered. In hidden chapels beneath homes. In whispered prayers that mixed Greek with Turkish. In the children of widows who grew up, speaking the conqueror's language, but dreaming in the old one. Even centuries later, travellers would describe Istanbul as a city haunted by absence hours, though every marble column remembered the choir that used to sing beside it, as if every dark alley held the echo of boots, swords, chants. Yet it endured, because it changed, and in doing so, it became something neither fully Eastern nor fully Western. It became the hinge of the world. They were known as Legio Ninth, Hispanathi 9th Legion, the Bull of Rome, battle-hardened veterans who had fought in Gaul, crushed rebellions in Hispania, and spilled blood across Germania. They were professionals, disciplined, feared, a force designed not just to kill, but to intimidate entire populations into silence. And yet, sometime after 117 CE, the 9th marched north from their fortress in Eborica modern-day York. And then, nothing. No return. No reports. No survivors. Just absence. Historians have theories. Some say they were ambushed by northern tribes in Caledonia, modern Scotland, where the Romans never had full control. Others say they were redeployed elsewhere and lost in later campaigns. Some believe their erasure was deliberatia, shameful defeat, buried beneath imperial records. But the most chilling theory? That they were never meant to be remembered at all. Let's step into that world. The roads are narrow, slick with moss and old rain. The moors stretch out like a battlefield that hasn't decided whether it's dead yet. Wind slaps your face with cold, wet fingers. Your armor is soaked. Your boots are soft with mud. Behind you, the legion marches 0 men, auxiliaries, archers, scouts, mules, engineers. The full weight of Rome's war machine. But this is not Rome. This is the edge. North of Hadrian's line. North of the wall that won't be built for another decade. Beyond the empire's breadth. The locals picks Caledonians. Countless scattered tribes do not fear you. They watch from the hills. They know the land. You don't. They move like ghosts. You march like thunder. And thunder doesn't belong in the mist. The first sign comes when your scouts don't return. 2 days. Nothing. Then your supply line is cut mules gone, wagons overturned, drivers dead with their throats opened so neatly it looks ritual. Still, you press on. Orders are orders. Your commander, probably a man named Lucius Aemilius Carus, writes back to York. Maybe a request for reinforcements. Maybe just a report. Hostile terrain, minimal resistance, continuing north. That letter never arrives. Because the storm is coming. It begins in the night. Screaming, fire, horns you've never heard before long, shrill like animal cries echoed through bone. The men wake confused. Someone is on fire. The tents are cut open from beneath. A cohort is missing. In the morning, the snow begins, and you see the hill ahead of you covered in figures, painted blue, naked from the waist up, holding spears taller than a man and axes that were forged in stone. They scream again, and your centurion gives the order. The 9th forms ranks. Shields up, pylon ready. You charge. And that's the last anyone ever hears. No bodies are found. No shields recovered. No grave markers. A legion trained to build roads, conquer cities, and pacify nations. Vanished into the hills. Later, Roman officials say nothing. Some records continue to list the 9th as active. Others omit them entirely. They are not included in later legion deployment charts. By the time Hadrian builds his wall in 122 CE, the 9th is a ghost. And still, the land remembers. In the 18th century, a slab is unearthed in York bearing the name of Legio the 9th, Hispana, the last trace. Today, archaeologists still argue. Some insist they were transferred east, perhaps to Judea, and lost in a different slaughter. Others believe their total annihilation in Britain was too embarrassing to preserve. Rome hated defeat. But on the cold moors of Caledonia, local legends speak of Roman ghosts marching through the fog, lost forever, shields covered in moss, spears crumbling into peat. Sometimes, hikers say they hear the clatter of distant armor in the mist. Sometimes, a wolf call echoes that sounds almost like a war horn. And sometimes, the wind carries a word that no one here should know. Latin. There were tremors after the 9th vanished. Not earthquakes, not revolts. Something quieter, stranger. Rome didn't fall because the 9th was lost, but a thread had snapped, and somewhere deep inside the imperial machine, something shuddered. This wasn't supposed to happen. Rome didn't lose legions without explanation. Even disastrous defeats had paperwork. Teutoburg Forest had 3 destroyed legions and 100 public memorials. But this? No poems, no statues, no orders of succession, just silence. The empire had rules. If you marched north, you wrote dispatches. If a cohort was ambushed, you sent runners. If a legion was wiped out, the Senate debated, the scribes recorded, coins were minted in remembrance. None of that happened for Legio IX Hispana. So, what did that do to the men in charge? Imagine Hadrian Rome's restless, brilliant emperor sitting at his desk, reading the absence, the not letter, the word that should have arrived by now. He doesn't know if it's incompetence, betrayal, or worse. He commissions a wall, 80 miles long, stone and turf, stretching from coast to coast, Hadrian's Wall. Not just a border and admission. Here the empire stops. Beyond this, there be monsters. Not dragons or demons, but something harder to name. Unconquerable people. Unknowable land. Unanswered questions. And to the people of Roman Britain, farmers, merchants, centurions, posted far from home, the legend spreads faster than the facts. The 9th is gone, they whisper over wine. 5,000 men gone. And so rumours bloom. One version says they were betrayed from within, the auxiliaries turned on them. Maybe during a snowstorm, maybe at a feast, slaughtered in their sleep. Another version claims a great chieftain name, lost to time, united the tribes, lured the 9th into a valley, and crushed them beneath rock slides and fire traps. Not a battle, a ritual. And then there's the darkest tale, that they never died, that they were taken, dragged underground into the Barrow Hills, bound by curses, sealed with ancient runes, used as blood payment for some forgotten offence. The Celts had stories older than Rome, stone circles that sang in moonlight, burial mounds that wept, wells that swallowed entire families. What if the 9th didn't march into a battlefield, but into a boundary? Not just between Rome and Britain, between man and something else. Because after the 9th, strange things were recorded. Roman scouts refusing to go north of a certain line. Statues found broken not by weather, but split down the middle as if by some invisible blade. A Roman fort discovered in modern times, walls intact, gate sealed, inside, nothing, no signs of battle, no decay, just emptiness. Beds still made, fires half burned. Like everyone stood up and walked away all at once. And if you ask the local Stode, in parts of Scotland, they'll still talk about the Lost March. They'll tell you to never dig too deep near the peat fields north of Inverness, that if you walk alone near the standing stones at dusk, you'll hear footsteps behind you, measured, armoured, unhurried. Some say the 9th still marches, trapped between worlds. Not alive, not dead, just forgotten. And maybe that's worse. Because if Rome mighty, organised, glorious Rome could lose 5,000 men and say nothing, what else got lost? What else got buried on purpose? And how close to the surface is it, really? The heat shimmers off the bronze tripod as the fire rises. It smells like scorched resin and the bitter smoke of cypress bark. Inside the palace temple, carved pillars stretch toward the heavens, shadows dancing across the faces of ancestral masks. It is dark, enclosed, humid with incense and sweat. At the centre, beneath an overhanging beam carved with dragons, sits the diviner, and in front of him, a flat piece of bone, usually turtle shell, sometimes ox scapula. Pale white, smoothed, scraped clean, prepared with care, like a letter to a god. This is not superstition. This is governance. This is the Shang dynasty, the first confirmed dynasty of ancient China, and thesaurical bone divinationis, how power speaks to the invisible. The king does not rule alone. He rules with the consent of the ancestors, and the ancestors answer through fire. A scribe stands by, brush in hand. His ink is thick, made from soot and water, crushed on a stone slab. The question has already been carved onto the back of the shell in tiny, neat script. Will it rain tomorrow? Is the general's campaign favourable? Will the king's child be born healthy? Is there danger from the west? The diviner takes a rod of heated bronze from the fire. He places it carefully against a pre-drilled pit on the underside of the shell. Crack. A sharp, sudden sound like a knuckle popping, or a curse leaving the mouth. A crack appears on the surface. The scribe notes it fast, the angle, the direction, the depth, then another pit, another heat rod. Crack, crack. The bones split in delicate spiderweb patterns. Some say you can smell the spirits in the smoke. Then comes the interpretation. Sometimes the diviner reads the cracks like a map, declaring fortune or disaster. Sometimes the king himself reads them, and sometimes no answer comes. Just silence in the flame. But even that is useful. Even that is information. The bone is then inscribed with the full event, the date, the question, the divination result, and sometimes the outcome. It becomes a record, the earliest form of Chinese writing, a sacred ledger of fire, bone, and fear. Tens of thousands of these have been found in the ruins of Yin, the last capital of the Shang, buried in pits, stacked in layers, some broken, some stained, some with characters so precise they rival modern print. They tell stories modern history never would have recorded. Of toothaches and droughts, of war and childbirth, of ghosts sighted near the eastern gate, of tigers killing 3 men by the river, of dreams that disturbed the queen. One king, Wu Ding, used them obsessively. He asked the ancestors about everything. He even consulted them before calling his powerful general wife, Fu Hao, to war. Fu Hao would become a military legend. Her tomb, discovered in the 20th century, held bronze weapons, battle axes, and thousands of cowrie shellsproof of her rank, wealth, and unmatched influence. But even she was subject to the bones, because the bones were never just about predicting the future. They were about controlling it. By asking a question, you gave shape to fear. By carving it, you gave it form. By heating it, cracking it, recording it, you turned chaos into a plan. And if the gods didn't like the answer, you performed a sacrifice. Sometimes it was wine. Sometimes animals. Sometimes humans. Yes, human sacrifice was practiced. Not always commoners either. Slaves, prisoners, and sometimes even minor royals. Blood for clarity, pain for peace. The ritual was calculated, not cruel, a transaction. And so, kings ruled not just by force, but by divination. Their authority flowed downward from ancestors who once walked the earth. Their words were etched into the shell, their decisions baked into bone, and the writing they left behind the earliest known form of Chinese scriptis still legible, thousands of years later. You can read them. You can feel the urgency in the brushstrokes. They didn't know they were making history. They just wanted to know, will the plague end? Will my son live? Will the harvest fail? And even now, that feels familiar. Because long before search engines, satellites, and scientific consensus, there was fire, there was bone, and there was a question.